November 8th, 2016. Donald John Trump shocks the world and wins the U.S. presidential election against all odds. On November 12th, President-elect Donald John Trump sets up his transition team at the Trump Tower in New York, setting the stage for the peaceful transfer of power in the U.S. for the 44th time in its history. November 16th, 2016, a week after the election. President Obama traveled to Berlin for the meeting with European leaders of the Quint. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President Hollande, British Prime Minister Theresa May, Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, and Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy. The leaders discussed trade, the Ukrainian crisis, the Syrian civil war, and the Islamic State of Iraq. President Obama had a private dinner at the Hotel Adlon later that night with Chancellor Merkel. This day is the day that Admiral Mike Rogers notified the Trump transition team that they were being surveilled. Subsequently, on November 17th, the Trump campaign announced its plans to move its transition operation headquarters to New Jersey. On November 18th, 2016, 10 days after the election, President Obama traveled to Peru to attend the APEC Economic Leaders meeting in Lima, his last international trip as president, arriving at Jorge Chavez International Airport. President Obama also hosted a Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative town hall at the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru. But here's the meat. On the sidelines of this summit, he held bilateral meetings with Chinese President Xi, Australian Prime Minister at the time Malcolm Turnbull, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Notice this particularly motley crew he's meeting with here, all playing a huge role in the 2016 election and the events that would unfold in the months and years to come, and still to come. January 6th, 2017. The Obama family hosted their final star-studded soiree at the White House, just weeks before Donald Trump is to be sworn in as the 45th President of the United States. Their farewell bash alone featured bold-faced names, including Meryl Streep, Dave Letterman, Tom Hanks, Chrissy Teigen, John Legend, Bruce Springsteen, Beyonce, Usher, Stevie Wonder, Oprah Winfrey, and more. Folks, I'm going to reread to you these names, and I want you to think about the things they've done and said since DJT was inaugurated. Meryl Streep, Dave Letterman, Tom Hanks, Chrissy Teigen, John Legend, Bruce Springsteen, Beyonce, Usher, Stevie Wonder, and Oprah Winfrey. In an interview with Ellen DeGeneres on January 11th, 2017, Billy Eichner told the talk show host just how overwhelming the scene was. He said, quote, "You're online going through security with David Letterman, Bruce Springsteen, Paul McCartney, Stevie Wonder. It's 2 a.m, and the president has his sleeves rolled up and a couple of buttons down, and he's like breaking it down on the dance floor. Questlove is blasting Kendrick Lamar in the White House, next to a huge picture of Mary Todd Lincoln. Disgusting." On January 20th, 2017, Donald John Trump is inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States of America, and Barack Hussein Obama departs the White House for the last time on Marine One. After 2 years of campaigning and 8 years of long, hard presidency, you'd think one would want to take it easy for a while. But this man barely takes 2 weeks off. The POTUS receives a pension of $161,000 a year. Granted, that's not enough to fulfill a type of lifestyle that these people have become so accustomed to, but it's enough to be able to take a year or so off after leaving office. Let's not forget that this pension plan also provides money to maintain a staff and a facility or an office for 4.5 years upon leaving office. I understand that George Washington went on to become the country's largest whiskey distiller after office, and Taft became Supreme Court justice and served for 12 years, but these were different times when there wasn't much for a pension, and presidents were given a handshake and a pat on the back when they left. They had to continue to work. More recently, we see Jimmy Carter, the Bushes, and Bill Clinton establishing charities and foundations with really only Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton putting in any real-time or hands-on work, while Bush Jr. seems to have basically left his disabled vets charity to be ran by staff while he paints portraits. When researching past presidents leaving office or reading past presidential memoirs, one finds that presidents usually go off into the sunset with goals of accruing personal wealth for themselves and their families, which is reasonable, but by usually staying out of hard politics, usually only commenting on endorsements and etc., and not in any real hands-on way. But in most cases, they've merely slipped away, not to be heard from much after leaving, and they've all taken many months off before beginning their new personal ventures. But not Barack Obama. Not only did Barack Obama immediately begin, in fact, he began even before he left office, to globetrot, visiting powerful world leaders for meetings. He also decided to stay in the swamp, buying a place just down the road from his old residence, the White House. Again, very, very odd behavior. About 2 weeks after leaving office, he found some time to vacation with Richard Branson on his island, but it was back to work shortly after this. On April 17, 2017, Japanese PM Abe visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago, becoming the second high-ranking world leader to visit after Theresa May on January 28, 2017. Interestingly, 3 days earlier, on April 14, 2017, Barack Obama cruises on the 138-meter Rising Sun yacht, where the couple and friends spent the morning off the island of Moorea in the South Pacific. And if you follow this channel, you'll notice the name of that yacht, just as I did, the Rising Sun. Obama and his wife, Michelle, U.S. singer Bruce Springsteen, U.S. actor Tom Hanks, and TV personality Oprah Winfrey spent 2 hours aboard the Rising Sun before leaving for Tahiti. And I found that interesting, as Japan is known as the land of the rising sun. I'm not sure if this was some kind of a signal to someone or what, given that the Japanese PM would meet Trump 3 days later. On May 9th, former U.S. President Barack Obama is seen waving here after speaking at the Global Food and Innovation Summit in Milan, Italy. This comes about 2 weeks before President Trump hits Italy for the G7 summit on May 23rd. Please take a glance at this article from the website popsugar.com. Please take a look at the date of this, May 23rd, 2017. The article reads, "Is anyone having more fun than Barack and Michelle Obama post-presidency?" On Saturday, Michelle was spotted doing some sightseeing in Montalcino, Italy, with a few friends and Secret Service personnel. As Michelle got in some girl time, Barack hit the links and was seen playing a round of golf. The following day, Barack and Michelle met up for another round of sightseeing fun, this time at the 5-star Borgo estate in Tuscany. The adorable couple cuddled up while their friends snapped pictures of them. Between the scenery and those smiles, we're sure the photos came out beautifully. Puke. Now listen up here. During their time in Italy, Barack is reportedly set to meet with Matteo Renzi, the former Italian prime minister. Now, Renzi is the guy who was in charge and working with Hussein through Five Eyes to help spy on the Trump team. I understand that at this point Renzi is a past PM, however. He may still have quite a bit of pull still in Italy at this time. Obama arrived in Berlin, which we know holds the greatest influence and may well be the true leadership of the EU, on the very day, May 25th, that President Trump met with NATO leaders in Brussels at the 28th NATO summit to get them to pay their fair shares. The reason was reportedly to engage in a discussion on democracy with Merkel. Obama then immediately headed to England to visit the royals, and this was just in time to hash things out over there before POTUS arrives in Germany for the G20 summit 5 weeks later, giving the Crown enough time to get their orders to May, of whom POTUS would have a bilateral meeting with at this summit. 2 days later, on May 27th, 2017, while President Trump is preparing to leave talks in Italy, the former president is in Kensington meeting with the British Crown. Less than 2 weeks later, in early June 2017, the former president is in Canada lunching with PM Justin Trudeau, supposedly there to speak to the Montreal Chamber of Commerce. A month later, on July 6th, as stated a moment ago, President Trump heads to Germany for the G20 summit to meet with Trudeau, Merkel, May, and Xi of China. The last trip for the summer for the president was on July 13th when he traveled to France to meet Macron and celebrate Bastille Day. The following April, Macron would be the first state visit for the Trump administration. Ironically, after this July 2017 meeting, but before the April 2018 state visit, Barack Obama goes to France in December of 2017 to visit Macron, whom, by the way, wasn't even a world leader at the time when Hussein was the president. So they had no prior peer or working relationship, making this meeting odd to me. Reading from this Daily Caller article, former U.S. President Barack Obama is ending a 5-day international trip in Paris, where he is lunching with French President Emmanuel Macron and scheduled to give a speech to business leaders. Obama arrived at the presidential Elysee Palace at midday on Saturday. The area was placed under high security. The French presidency said the private lunch was expected to include a presentation about the Obama Foundation. Sure. No journalists were allowed at the meal, of course. He also planned to meet with former French President François Hollande. His evening speech, organized by a club for leaders from the internet and communication industries, is on the theme, Fear Less, Innovate More. As covered earlier in this presentation, Obama was in China and India before he arrived in France. Earlier Saturday, Obama discussed climate issues with Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo. On Friday, the former president lashed out at the current administration, taking a thinly veiled dig at Donald Trump as he addressed a leadership summit in India. Now, this particular quote from this trip, I'd like you to listen to real closely, folks. The 44th president, who helped pen the Paris Climate Agreement, which he signed in 2015, said there has been a, quote, pause in American leadership, end quote, on the issue. A pause in American leadership? Pause is defined as to cease or suspend an action temporarily. Temporarily, huh? So this means that what President Trump is doing, the bidding of over 60 million Americans who voted for him, is considered as something temporary to the cabal and their minions. A pause of the official policy of theirs, so to speak. And pauses come to an end. They aren't long-term. As defined, they are temporary, meaning that once they snatch the power back, then the pause stops and the original policies are again implemented. Completely disregarding and working against the will of over 60 million American citizens who appointed Donald John Trump to do what it is he is doing. A pause in American leadership, according to Barack Obama. International trips for the president slows down for a while until November. However, the same can't be said for the shadow president. The shadow president heads to New York in September of 2017 to speak at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Manhattan. On November 5th, 2017, the president begins his Asian trip. First to Japan to meet with Abe, And Abe is a big player on the world stage due to Japan's strong economy and their geographical location. Abe most likely played a large role in cutting the strings of the CIA black site known as North Korea. And the same can be said for South Korea, where the president then went on November 7th, most likely to discuss some of the same things that he did with Abe. On November 8th, the president heads to China to meet with Xi. It is during this trip that President Trump was invited to dine in the Forbidden City, and it is theorized and rumored that he was able to secretly meet here with Kim Jong-un and set up the future peace and disarmament talks that would be held the next year in 2018. On November 10th, 2017, the president leaves Beijing for Vietnam, then the Philippines, then home. Again, coincidentally, 15 days after Trump finishes his Asian trip, former President Barack Obama heads to Beijing to meet with Xi. According to an article by CNN, it claims it is the first time the two have met since Obama left office. Reading from the article. As president, Obama forged a close and cooperative partnership with President Xi on issues ranging from growing the global economy to combating climate change, and he looks forward to catching up with his former counterpart. The visit comes just weeks after President Trump met with the Chinese leader himself during his own trip to Asia. During that trip, the president criticized various Chinese trade policies and protested the out-of-control U.S. trade deficit with China. But he did not blame China for the trade problems, instead saying his predecessors in the White House were at fault. Can you see what's happening here? How could anyone work under these conditions? As the president is attempting to conduct foreign policy, the previous administration and its minions are actively working against it. It's unprecedented, really. One must understand that leaders like Xi, for instance, have teams of scholars who have studied American politics. These teams most likely know more about American civics than 99% of Americans do. Xi knows that whoever is the POTUS is the one who ultimately holds the power. So the shadow president was visiting these world leaders before and after the legitimate president was doing so. He was most likely telling the Xis and the Merkels and the Abes to wait Trump out. Using the controlled MSM as a weapon, he most likely told them that Trump was on his way out through impeachment soon and to follow along with the news reports as proof. Putting yourself in the world leader's shoes, what would you do? It looks as though the cabal was still in control and things seem bleak for Trump if you're watching the news. A reasonable world leader might just decide to wait things out, as the Trump administration seemed to be a disaster that was to be short-lived, again, if you're watching the news. A whole presidency undermined, even negated. But it wasn't just a shadow presidency. It's a full-fledged shadow administration. Take former Secretary of State John Kerry. Here he is, meeting in Paris with the Iranian PM in May of 2018, seemingly still conducting diplomacy as he did as Secretary of State. When asked about this a few months later in September by the New York Post, Kerry said he's sat down with Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, quote, 3 or 4 times in places including Norway and Munich and Paris since leaving office last year. They're bold folks, and it's because they've been getting away with doing this kind of stuff right in front of your face for decades. Well, how about actual holdovers still in government positions after Trump was inaugurated? Take Sally Yates. She didn't waste any time for the resistance. As acting Attorney General, Yates was able to unmask Michael Flynn and his calls with Kislyak. This, of course, was a blockade to slow down any attempt to attack the cabal and to go along with the larger plan of eventual impeachment of President Trump. Later in the year, she refused to enforce the president's ban from terrorists and terrorist-sponsoring states, along with other dirt I'm sure that went on behind the scenes that we have not yet heard of? What about the great, respectful, honorable Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, quid pro quo, whistleblower? How about U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch? What about CIA Ukraine expert Eric C? And of course, we can't forget about the IG Atkinson now either, can we? And this is just the ones involved in the Ukraine fiasco. Then we head to the FBI and the Russian collusion delusion and see Comey working for the shadow president too. Then with the Sessions recusal at the DOJ, Rod Rosenstein, another shadow administrator, enters the scene. This is not only remarkable, but it is unprecedented, folks. Everywhere you look, there's another demon, another minion, another snake waiting to deceive the president or set him up, like by wearing a wire, for instance. This is a very dangerous situation for American citizens, and the irony of it all is that tens of millions of these citizens have absolutely no idea that any of this is even occurring. When a previous administration is conducting a dueling presidency that contrasts with the current one, the one that over 60 million Americans voted for, this gets tricky. Hussein is actively working against the will of the American people by conducting this campaign. If you are awake and paying attention, you'll know that the goals that Hussein is trying to achieve are not in the best interests of American citizens, or the citizens of the world for that matter. His goals are the goals of his masters, and those goals have nothing whatsoever to offer the common man. Nothing. Nothing but total submission and enslavement. Hussein was giving all the major world players an out. He first visited them, either before or after the president. He told them that Trump was temporary, and as he said in his speeches as he shadowed Trump, that this was merely a, quote, pause in American leadership. As stated earlier, with the help of nearly every major news network, this fake reality would seem real. When we look at the cabal control of the tech industry, or maybe I should say the cabal creation of the tech industry, see LifeLog, we can understand how the cult controllers can then reinforce the lies from the MSM and create an echo chamber of lies curated precisely for the poor victim. Then, when we see those parties near the end of the Hussein administration, then the boat trips, like on the Rising Sun in April of 2017, with these celebrities and personalities, we can see that this is being choreographed by Obama into every facet of one's reality. The poor victim is bombarded by establishment talking points and deceptions through their politicians, their news, their social media, their movies, sports, and entertainment. If a world leader was listening to Obama on the side while watching all of these other indicators, they would have to think long and hard whether or not to deal with Trump whatsoever. Why would they? If he is to be ousted at any moment, or in the least can't possibly be reelected after the supposed disaster of his first term, basically handcuffing the incoming president, ladies and gentlemen. And as stated a moment ago, this is unprecedented and very, very dangerous. And, dear listeners, the only question I have for myself and for you is, what in the hell are we going to do about it? If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, share, and subscribe.